I thought I was going to surprise my son Jake with a visit and his favorite homemade cookies. Instead, I got the shock of my life when his girlfriend Maya screamed at me like I was some kind of monster, called me crazy, and literally banned me from their home. But what she didn't know was that I had been quietly documenting everything for months. Every blocked call, every intercepted letter, and every lie she told about me. By the time I was done with my revenge, she wished she'd never messed with a mother's love. This is how I exposed her manipulation and saved my son from a predator who was slowly destroying his life, one lie at a time. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let me know where you're listening from in the comments. My name is Lisa, and I'm 45 years old. I work as a nurse at our local hospital, and I've been a single mother since my son Jake was 8 years old. His father walked out on us when things got tough, leaving me to raise the most incredible little boy who became my whole world. Jake wasn't just my son, he was my best friend, my partner in crime, my reason for getting up every morning. We had this beautiful relationship that I thought nothing could ever break. How wrong I was. For 15 years, it was just Jake and me against the world. We had weekly dinner dates where he'd tell me about everything happening in his life. We texted each other constantly throughout the day, silly memes, inside jokes, just checking in. He used to call me his best friend and would bring me flowers on Mother's Day, not because he had to, but because he genuinely wanted to make me smile. When he got his first job as a software developer at 22, the first thing he did was take me out to celebrate. I was so proud of the man he'd become, kind, gentle, trusting, everything his father wasn't. Then Maya walked into our lives. I first met her at Jake's 23rd birthday dinner last year. She seemed sweet enough, a 21-year-old waitress with a bright smile and this way of making Jake light up whenever she spoke. I wanted to love her because Jake did. She complimented my cooking constantly, asked for my recipes, even wanted tips on how to take care of Jake when he got sick. I thought I'd hit the jackpot with a future daughter-in-law who actually liked his mother. But looking back now, I can see the red flags I chose to ignore. During that birthday dinner, Maya had this way of monopolizing Jake's attention. Every time he started telling a story about his childhood or something funny we'd done together, she'd interrupt with her own story or suddenly need his help with something. When I'd try to share a memory, she'd give this tight smile and change the subject. I told myself I was being paranoid, that she was just young and maybe a little insecure. The changes started so gradually that I didn't even notice them at first. Our weekly dinners became every other week, then once a month. When I'd call Jake, it would take him hours to call me back instead of answering right away like he used to. But he always had reasonable explanations. "Sorry, Mom, Maya has anxiety around phone calls when I'm with her," he'd say. Or "We were at dinner and you know how I hate being on my phone when I'm eating." I found myself apologizing for calling my own son. The excuses became more frequent and more elaborate. Maya apparently had social anxiety that made family gatherings difficult for her. She had work conflicts every time I invited her to join us for shopping trips or movies. Jake started using phrases I'd never heard from him before, things like healthy boundaries and codependent relationships. When I asked where this was coming from, he'd get defensive and say he was just learning to be more mature in his relationships. I bent over backwards trying to make Maya comfortable. I invited her to girls' days out, offered to teach her Jake's favorite recipes, even suggested we plan a surprise party for Jake together. But there was always an excuse, always a reason she couldn't make it work. Meanwhile, Jake seemed to be walking on eggshells around her, constantly checking his phone when we were together, cutting our visits short because Maya needed him for something. The worst part was watching my confident, happy son become anxious and withdrawn. He started losing weight, developing dark circles under his eyes. When I expressed concern, he'd snap at me in ways he never had before. "You're being controlling, just like Maya said you'd be," he told me during what turned out to be our last normal conversation. The words hit me like a physical blow. In all our years together, Jake had never called me controlling. I started questioning everything. Was I too involved in his life? Was I the problem? Christmas became a nightmare. Jake seemed tense the entire time, constantly texting Maya and stepping outside to take her calls. When I asked if everything was okay, he said Maya was having a hard time being away from him. I suggested she join us next year and Jake just gave me this look like I'd suggested something completely unreasonable. Then came my birthday. For the first time in 23 years, Jake wasn't there. He called that morning to say Maya had planned a surprise getaway and they were already on the road. I spent my 45th birthday alone, staring at the cake I'd bought for myself, wondering how I'd lost my son to someone who seemed determined to erase me from his life. But nothing could have prepared me for what happened when Jake's father died suddenly of a heart attack 6 months ago. I called Jake, sobbing, begging him to come to the funeral. He initially agreed, and for a moment, I thought maybe this tragedy would bring us back together. Then he called me back 2 hours later. "Maya thinks it's not healthy for me to go," he said, his voice hollow. "Dad wasn't even in my life that much anyway." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. This was his father's funeral, and he was letting his girlfriend of barely a year decide whether he should attend. But Jake had made his choice, and it wasn't me. As I sat in that funeral home, surrounded by distant relatives and family friends, the empty chair beside me felt like a symbol of everything I'd lost. That's when I realized I wasn't just losing my son, I had already lost him. 3 months after sitting alone at that funeral, staring at the empty chair where my son should have been, I made a decision that would change everything. I had spent those months respecting the boundaries Maya had convinced Jake to set, hoping that giving them space would somehow bring my son back to me. Instead, Jake had become a stranger. Our daily texts had stopped completely. He hadn't called me once since the funeral. It was like I had ceased to exist in his world. My therapist had been gently suggesting that Jake might be in an emotionally abusive relationship, but I kept making excuses for Maya. "She's just young," I'd say. "She's probably insecure about his relationship with me." But deep down, I knew something was terribly wrong. A mother's instinct is rarely wrong, and mine was screaming that my son was in danger. That's when I decided to make an unannounced visit. I baked Jake's favorite chocolate chip cookies, the same recipe I'd been making for him since he was 5 years old. These weren't just any cookies, they were our tradition, our special thing. Every time he was sick, stressed, or celebrating something important, I made these cookies. If anything could remind him of who we used to be to each other, it would be these. I drove to his apartment with my heart pounding. I still had a key, but something told me to knock instead. I wanted to be respectful, to show Jake that I understood his need for independence. Maybe if I approached this right, we could start rebuilding what we'd lost. Maya answered the door, and the look on her face when she saw me was pure fury. "What are you doing here?" she demanded, not even a pretense of politeness. I held up the container of cookies, trying to keep my voice calm and friendly. "Hi, Maya. I just wanted to see Jake and bring him some cookies. I know how much he loves them." Her eyes narrowed. "You can't just show up. You're crazy. Jake said you'd try this manipulative shit." The word crazy hit me like a slap. I had never done anything to warrant being called crazy. I was a nurse, for crying out loud. I helped people for a living. I took care of everyone around me. But before I could respond, Jake appeared behind her. My heart broke seeing him. He looked even thinner than at Christmas, his skin pale and drawn. But what hurt most was that he wouldn't meet my eyes. My son, who used to run to me with the biggest hugs, now stood behind his girlfriend like I was some kind of threat. "Mom, you should have called first," he mumbled, still not looking at me directly. I tried to hand him the cookies, the same cookies I'd been making him his entire life. Maya snatched them from my hands before Jake could even reach for them. "We don't want anything from her," she announced, holding the container like it was contaminated. That's when I started crying. I couldn't help it. Standing there on my son's doorstep, being treated like a criminal for the crime of loving him, was more than I could bear. "Jake, I'm your mother. I love you. What happened to us?" My voice was breaking, but I didn't care about my dignity anymore. For just a moment, I saw a flicker of the old Jake in his eyes. He looked torn, confused, like he was fighting some internal battle. But then Maya stepped closer to him, her hand possessive on his arm. "You need to leave," Jake said, his voice barely above a whisper. This is exactly the kind of drama Maya warned me about. Drama. I was drama for wanting to see my son, for bringing him cookies, for existing in his life. I drove home in a daze, but by the time I reached my house, heartbreak had transformed into determination. If Maya wanted to play games, I could play too. But first, I needed to know exactly who I was dealing with. I spent the next week becoming a detective. I searched Maya's social media profiles, going back years. What I found was disturbing. Photo after photo showed Maya with different boyfriends, but there was a pattern. In the early photos with each guy, his family members were tagged and included. But as the relationships progressed, the family members disappeared from the photos. The guys stopped posting about family events, family dinners, family anything. Then I discovered something that made my blood run cold. Maya's Venmo account was partially public, and since Jake had linked his account to hers, I could see some of their transaction history. There were frequent payments to something called Lucky Stars Casino and Golden Jackpot Games. Maya was gambling, and from the amounts I could see, she wasn't winning. I tried calling Jake multiple times over the next few days, but every single call went straight to voicemail. Either he was ignoring me or someone was making sure I couldn't reach him. I started to suspect the latter when I realized something else troubling. I hadn't received thank you cards from Jake for any of the gifts I'd sent in recent months. Jake had been raised to always send thank you notes. It was one of the values I'd instilled in him from childhood. The fact that I wasn't receiving them made me suspicious. I contacted the postal service and discovered that a mail forwarding request had been filed from Jake's address to a PO box across town. Someone was intercepting his mail. I had a pretty good idea who. I spent the next afternoon staking out that PO box, feeling like I was in some kind of spy movie. Sure enough, around 3 p.m., Maya showed up with a key. I watched her collect a stack of mail, and I was close enough to see my own handwriting on several envelopes. She was stealing my letters to my son. I took photos of everything: Maya collecting the mail, the letters with my handwriting visible, even her license plate. I was building a case, though I wasn't sure yet what I'd do with the evidence. That evening, while researching Maya more thoroughly, I found something that would change everything. In the comments section of one of Maya's older posts, someone named Grace White had written, "Stop doing this to people, Maya. You're sick." White was Maya's last name. This had to be a family member. I clicked on Sarah's profile and found what I was looking for: photos of Grace and Maya together, clearly sisters. But the most recent photos were from over 2 years ago, and Sarah's recent posts contained subtle hints about cutting toxic people out of her life. I sent Gracie a direct message: "I think your sister is dating my son, and I'm very concerned about his well-being. Would you be willing to talk?" Sarah's response came within an hour: "Are you dating someone Maya is involved with? Because I need to warn you about what she does to people." We arranged to meet the next day, and for the first time in months, I felt hope. Gracie and I met at a quiet coffee shop downtown, and within 5 minutes of sitting across from her, I knew I'd found an ally. Grace was 28, a marketing manager with tired eyes that told me she'd been dealing with Maya's destructive behavior for years. "Maya has done this exact same thing to 3 other boyfriends," Grace said, sliding her phone across the table to show me screenshots of text messages. "She targets men who have close relationships with their families because she gets off on the control." The texts were nauseating. Maya bragging to Grace about training Jake to cut out his mother, laughing about how easy it was to make him skip his father's funeral. But the worst part was seeing Maya's gambling addiction laid bare. Grace showed me bank statements. Maya owed over $30,000 to various creditors and had been using Jake's credit cards to fund her addiction. She's stolen $15,000 from his accounts so far, Grace said quietly. "I have all the documentation because I've been tracking her financial crimes for months, hoping someone would finally press charges." Grace introduced me to Maya's previous victims, 3 men who had all gone through the exact same pattern. Isolated from their families, financially exploited, emotionally manipulated until they were shadows of themselves. 2 of them had lost their life savings. 1 had attempted suicide after Maya disappeared with his college fund. "We can't just tell Jake the truth," Grace warned me. "She's conditioned him not to trust anyone but her. We need him to see her real face for himself." That's when Grace suggested something brilliant. "What if I told Maya I wanted to reconcile? She's arrogant enough to believe she's won completely. If we can get her comfortable enough to show her true colors in front of Jake, he'll see what we've been trying to tell him." The plan was perfect. Grace would reach out to Maya, claiming she wanted to apologize and meet her wonderful boyfriend. Maya's ego wouldn't be able to resist the opportunity to show off her success with Jake. We'd book a private dining room at a restaurant, and I'd hide in the adjoining room with recording equipment to capture everything. Grace sent the text: "Maya, I've been thinking about our fight, and I want to apologize. Can I take you and Jake out to dinner? I'd love to meet the man who makes you so happy." Maya responded within minutes, practically gloating. "Finally, yes, let's do dinner tomorrow. I can't wait for you to see how amazing Jake is and how perfect we are together." The next evening, I sat in a cramped adjoining room with my phone recording while Grace played her role perfectly. Maya arrived with Jake, immediately launching into a character assassination of me. "His mother is absolutely psychotic," Maya announced loudly enough for me to hear through the thin walls. She showed up at our house uninvited like some kind of stalker. I had to ban her completely because she's so manipulative and controlling. Grace played along beautifully, asking questions that drew Maya deeper into her web of lies. Wow, that sounds really difficult. How did you handle someone so toxic? Maya's true personality emerged as she bragged about her manipulations. I had to cut him off from his family completely. Men are so weak when their mothers baby them. I threw away all her pathetic guilt trip letters and blocked her calls. Jake doesn't even know half the stuff she tried to pull. Then Grace steered the conversation toward money, and Maya became even more revealing. The best part is how easy Jake is to manage financially. He just hands me his cards whenever I need them. Men are so stupid about money they think they're being generous, but really I'm just taking what I deserve for putting up with his emotional baggage. I could hear Jake's voice getting quieter and more confused as Maya continued. Maya, what letters? My mom hasn't written me any letters. Oh please, Maya laughed. She was constantly sending you manipulative garbage trying to turn you against me. I was protecting you by getting rid of them. That's when I made my entrance. I walked into the dining room with a folder full of evidence, bank statements showing the gambling charges, photos of Maya collecting intercepted mail, and testimonies from her previous victims. I didn't come here to cause drama, I said calmly, my voice steady despite my racing heart. I came to show you the truth about what's been happening to you. Maya's mask completely slipped. She started screaming about how we were all conspiring against her, how Jake couldn't trust anyone but her. But Jake was staring at the bank statements, his face growing paler with each fraudulent charge he recognized. Grace revealed everything: Maya's gambling addiction, her history of isolating and financially exploiting boyfriends, the systematic way she had cut Jake off from everyone who loved him. When Maya realized she was cornered, she made threats. If you choose them over me, you'll regret it for the rest of your life, Jake. No one will ever love you like I do. But Jake had already seen enough. Get out, he said quietly, then louder, get out. Maya stormed off, screaming threats at all of us, but it was over. That night, Jake changed his locks and blocked Maya on everything. We filed charges for mail theft and credit card fraud the next morning. The aftermath was beautiful and heartbreaking. Jake cried for hours, apologizing for everything he'd said and done while under Maya's influence. He entered therapy to work through the manipulation he'd experienced, and slowly, we rebuilt our relationship stronger than ever. Maya's attempts to quickly move on to another victim failed because Grace and I had created a network warning potential targets. Her gambling debts caught up with her, and last I heard, she was living with her parents, banned from every casino in the state. 3 months later, Jake brought me flowers on a random Tuesday, just because he wanted to see me smile. Thank you for never giving up on me, Mom, he said. I almost lost everything that mattered because I couldn't see what was right in front of me. Sometimes the people who claim to love us are the ones destroying us from the inside. Trust your instincts, document everything, and never stop fighting for the people you love. If this story resonated with you, please hit that subscribe button and let me know in the comments where you're listening from. Have you ever dealt with someone trying to isolate you from your family? Share your story below, you never know who might need to hear it.